Hello and welcome to the Not Quite Otaku Anime Podcast, Episode 5. I'm Joe.
And I'm Brandon.
And today we're going to be talking about a sequel of sorts. And Brandon, what are we going to be talking about today?
So today we're going to be talking about Fooly Cooly, Progressive and Alternative, the two new iterations of the show that were released in 2018, I believe.
Yep, 2018. And so these are the both sequels to the original Fooly Cooly or FLCL.
Well, and we can get into that a little bit because Alternative isn't really a sequel, but when we get there, we'll talk about it.
Oh, okay. I mean, like I guess like sequel in name.
Yeah,
of like what it is.
I think
You know
it's kind of like got an alternate universe retelling type thing going on with it, but like I said, we'll talk about it when we get to that.
Interesting. But yeah, so these are the sequels to Fooly Cooly, which came out in the early 2000s, and I know for the two of us personally, our Fooly Cooly's probably. I mean, I'll speak for myself, is one of my favorite anime of all time.
Yeah, I would pretty much agree with that, and we were in a position to be the target audience for that show. I think where we saw it when we were kind of coming of age, we were teenagers, and that's kind of what the story's all about. So I think it just really resonated well with us. So
yeah, and I think we'll talk. I think as we talk about these, we'll get into that a little bit, but definitely, I know Fooly Cooly even just generally is referred to in top anime of all time. If you're gonna watch anything, watch that. And yeah, I mean, I've watched the original series I don't know how many times because it used to air on Adult Swim repeatedly. It's only 6 episodes long, so every time it came on, I would always stay up and continue to watch it. And then I've watched it. I own the DVD, stream it on Funimation, whatever. So I've just watched it a lot of times, even since then. I can't even count how many times.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to put a number on it either. I mean, and there was a time where it seemed like Adult Swim played it. It's only 6 episodes, like you said, so it's like each week they just play the entire series if they're playing it every night, and probably did that for like a couple years. So
yeah. So let's just, I think we should just jump right in. So this is kind of going to be, just our thoughts on these as sequels. If they're worthy sequels, if you're a fan of Fooly Cooly, is it worth checking these out? I know because we were both big fans, we had been talking about wanting to see them, and finally both of us sprung for the Blu-ray release, and gave it a view.
Yeah, it was something I wanted to watch when it came out, and then it wasn't accessible other than through Cartoon Network at first, and then I just kind of forgot about it. So then recently discovered that they have the double pack box set out with both of them in it, so it just seemed like a good time to get into it.
Yeah, so let's start. I'm trying to think if we want to. So I guess we can start Alternative just as a story. It revolves around.
Well, Progressive is.
I'm sorry. Yes, sorry, my bad. Progressive. Yeah,
Progressive was the first one released.
Yeah, Progressive is the first one. Sorry about that. I always want to say Alternative first, just because it's like I don't know if it's the alphabet, like A and then P. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But yes, so that centers around the girl who's the main character, Hidomi, and there's also a guy who I'd say is another one of the main characters, Ide, and so those are kind of your two protagonists in it. I guess let's just, because I know we don't necessarily want to go as much like, oh, and this is what happened in the story, but really our thoughts. So I guess I'll ask you this is what did you think of this?
So I thought, I'm trying to think the best way to describe. So do you know the movie Donnie Darko?
Yes.
So did you know there's a sequel to Donnie Darko?
Yes.
Okay, so the sequel to Donnie Darko, I know I'm kind of getting off the hook here.
No, I know where you're going, I think.
The sequel to Donnie Darko, it seems like someone watched Donnie Darko once and thought like, oh, I get it, and then tried to make a movie that hit all the like visual scenes of the first one, sometimes almost directly remaking those scenes.
Yeah.
But really just the soul was not there, and they really didn't understand like the underlying themes. And that's really what I felt about this show. Is it just sometimes some of the scenes were direct, even the dialogue was just direct pulls from the first series, and a lot of the visuals were as well. And it just did not hit at all for me. It seemed.
And you're
very
talking about
soulless.
Specifically Progressive, right?
Yeah, specifically Progressive.
Okay.
Alternative was a different story.
A different thing.
But yeah, Progressive looked like they were trying to make a remake of the original story with some slight changes. Hidomi is a girl instead of now it's a boy, but they still have this like too cool for school, aloof attitude that they're trying not to be way more mature than they actually are, and they're basically the same person. And then, like you said, you have Ida, who is physically almost just like Naota, which I think is why Haruko. It's a lot of off-screen stuff, but like Haruko first picks him to try to get
implied.
Yeah, and it's just a whole lot of recreating visual moments that don't have the same underlying weight that they did in the first series.
Yeah, the way you described that is exactly how I felt, especially specifically with Progressive. It felt I mean even watching I was like, "Oh yeah, that looks exactly like that scene." And it it kind of it's like okay to do those callbacks and those things, but what I agree with you, you said it lacked the soul of it. And that's exactly how I felt while watching it. I was watching it and I knew I was watching Fooly Cooley. Like, Haruko's there, there's the guitars getting smashed in the head, giant robots coming out of heads, all sorts of things. But it just never, specifically Progressive, never grabbed me. It just, yeah, it felt lifeless. And even I watched, like, the animation itself, it looked similar but different. And
it was a little worse, and it was noticeable.
Yeah, and so when I watched it again, it gave that feeling of this is something familiar to me, but it isn't the thing, and
I think the one that stood out most to me, speaking of the animation, is Haruko just looked kind of like lifeless compared to her Fooly Cooley version, the original. And also, like, they kind of changed up her character, where in the original series, she's got, like, going through her crazy alien antics, but also has these, like, glimmers of humanity in her where you can tell she kind of, like, feels bad for what she's doing to Naota.
Yeah.
And that's completely lost. Like, she's full-on sociopath alien in this.
No, that's so it's funny. It's just because that is exactly something I was thinking too. Is as I watched it, I was waiting for those moments of humanity.
Yeah.
There'd be moments in the first one, where I think I remember, like, in Naota's room and they're talking on the bed, and just there's these moments of tenderness that they'd have that I think, especially, like, we talked about watching that show at the age we were at and dealing with being a teenager or being and growing up and your feelings and emotions and all those things. And there was sort of that relationship that they had that gave it that heart to it. So it wasn't just this zany, wacky, crazy show, but that it would come back to a centered place and then it would explode again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this just sort of felt like it was just exploding all over and it never came back to center. So then you're just stuck watching a bunch of strung together zany scenes, and it was like Haruko's greatest hits of just being I'm this wacky character, and it never went back to seeing that other side of her. And I totally agree with you.
Yeah, they never reined it in. That's the perfect way to put it. And yeah, it just completely makes the character, to me, uninteresting, where it's like it's watching Looney Tunes with her or something.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it had all these callbacks. You see the old guitar, and that's cool, that's nice. I just think
like Conti shows up.
Yeah,
they give a shout out to Eyebrows.
Yeah, okay, that was kind of cool, because as I watched, I was like, I think that's his son or something like that. And so
I don't have a problem with that, and especially because that does, like I was saying, how these are two different, like, versions of a sequel, so to speak. This one is like a direct sequel. There's a couple lines in there about, like, Haruko did this before and it didn't work, and with call back to Eyebrows, her recognizing Conti, like, this did happen after the events of Fooly Cooley.
But I think overall too, just the characters, there's a new character, Jinyu, who's this very serious, straight-laced other guitar wielder, I guess you could say, who battles.
They don't express it incredibly clearly, but I think it's kind of like split personality off of Haruko, basically. Like,
okay, so yeah, I didn't pick that up. So maybe that is the thing that's missing, like we talked about, the centered part, and I feel like Jinyu filled that role.
Going for, but it wasn't very clear, and also still just didn't work for me. But
yeah, I just found the character kind of boring.
Yeah, 100%.
Honestly, and just the characters in general in this one, I just didn't resonate with me. I mean, again, Fooly Cooley, one of the things that for me personally, Naota, um, he just resonated with me as a character, what he was going through, dealing with love, emotions, and like you said, Fully Cooley hit at the right age. I think anyone who grew up during that time, who watched it, will agree with you. Will agree with us that you know it's one of those animes that just hits at the right time for the right reasons. But um, yeah, they just weren't interesting. Like Hidomi, she's the sullen character, and she plays that. And then there's a moment partway through where she gets wacky and goofy, and I found that episode really annoying. Actually, legitimately annoying to watch.
Yeah, I was
Um,
struggling to stay invested in that even more so than the rest of it, and I didn't like any of it. So like that
yeah.
was certainly the low point for me as well.
And another thing I just want to point out about this that is the story itself. So with the original Fooly Cooley, one of the things I really liked about it is that it feels like this disjointed, unrelated string of events that it comes together at the end. That you and the more you watch, I feel like the more you start to piece things together. So on a first viewing, you might not see the little links, but if you're someone like me who A, needs it, and B, has watched it 50 sometimes, because again, I will admit, I can miss some pretty obvious stuff sometimes, but you start to see this really solid, strong story with it, but it's told in a little less traditional way. Where I felt like this in Progressive, it felt like it was this attempt at telling a very linear story, and it didn't. But then it in turn didn't tell as good of a story as the original. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's definitely constructed a little bit different in that way, but at the same time, I don't think, and again, this could be because I just didn't really care about any of the characters and was uninvested in the show in general, but it didn't
yeah.
even seem like they did a good job of like putting together a linear story where you fully understood what was going on all the time,
Mm-hmm.
which is like that's not a thing you need to do, but it just I don't know. Again, I wasn't very interested in the storytelling. I think the only other thing that really struck me about this show compared to the original Fooly Cooley is so like
Mm-hmm.
sexuality is a big theme in both of them.
Yes.
But in the original, it always seemed to be like a subtle underlying uncomfortable, like Naota doesn't want to deal with the fact that he's going through puberty essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of being forced on him from some of the women in his life between Haruko and even Momimi, and
Mm-hmm.
in this one, the sexual themes come right in your face a lot of times as fan service, and it's just like kind of misses the point, and it's aggressive and not really. I don't know. It just doesn't do it
Yeah.
for me.
No, I totally agree. Like his relationship with Mamimi and how she is this, the older girl, his brother's girlfriend, and she kind of leads him in a way in this. It seems like a naturally, I don't know, like for anime, you could say it is like something that could actually happen, I guess, in a way. Like
Yeah.
the older girl, I'm gonna like, where yeah, this just all felt like thrown in your face, slapped,
Well,
and
this
even
is
his
like, hey, let's have a whole beach episode. Come on.
right,
like,
right, yeah, it's like come on,
let's
how many?
waste one of our 6 episodes on a beach episode. That's what people want.
Yeah, and so it just felt it always felt really forced in. It's like, hey, Fooly Cooley, it deals with themes of like sexuality and growing up and puberty. So now we're gonna shoehorn this all in, but in this really in your face way that doesn't feel natural. It just felt like, okay, we're doing a sequel to Fooly Cooley. Well, what are the ingredients? Sexual themes, go. And then that was what they come up with. You know what I mean?
I agree completely.
Um, I think one thing I did write down is Haruko's feelings for Adamisk. I saw this sort of parallel with Naota and her. I think one of the scenes that I always love in the original is when you know he flies down and he stops right before he's gonna hit Haruko, and he tells her, "I love you." And he just has this like look on his face. I don't. There's something about that scene that gets me every time.
Yeah, this
And
kind
I
of
feel like
yeah, I know, yeah, exactly what
you
you're
know
talking
exactly
about.
which one I'm
Yeah,
talking about, and there's a little bit of a parallel there, and it was one of those things that like that's the nice nod to the original.
yeah.
But again, and they did some cool stuff with animation. We talked about it didn't look as good, but then there were other moments where they tried different styles.
They
Some worked
did
more for
keep,
me than others.
yeah, they did keep those different styles though in the dream sequences for the most part, which was kind of annoying that it was like almost like it was separate to be very clear, like, oh, this isn't the real world, this is her
Yeah.
dreaming. Whereas in the, like, in Fooly Cooly the original, it's just a big mess that's all mixed in.
Yeah. Yeah. So that it actually, like, again, like I said, it's this disjointed world that somehow feels cohesive
Yeah,
because the rules of the world are that it is this crazy mess of things, as
yeah,
opposed to where you get this really linear story that follows very traditional anime kind of feel,
but
and
it
then you'll get
feels
these.
really disjointed.
Yeah, and it's again wasn't. Yeah, so I'm with you. It's just for me, progressive just didn't ever grab me, and that kind of sucks. I think it's just especially because I was interested at first to see that, oh, there's a new character and, oh, there's this stuff, but it just, I got to the end, and it kind of, it was like, oh, nice, and then Hidomi and Ide, they find each other, so you see their love, I guess, but yeah, it just didn't hit.
Yeah, I would be like, maybe if you're a young teenager now and have never heard of the original Fooly Cooly and you saw this, maybe it would work for them the same way the original did for us. I don't know, but as
Well,
someone
and
who is a fan of the original Fooly Cooly coming back to this, it's just not good, I don't think.
so it's interesting you say that, because going into to alternative, I have some thoughts on that
Okay.
kind of go back to this. So I think we can move on. I think we both can agree that progressive did not land for either of us, right?
Yeah. Yep. Soulless
Yeah.
remake. That's what I think about it.
Soulless remake. If yeah, that's our tagline for that. However, I will say the music's still awesome. They have the Pillows doing it. They have some new songs. New songs are good. Old
The new
songs
songs
are
are
good.
good. Shoving the old songs into like the first episode was again just one of those things. Like, are they not even going to put new music in this? Like, Little Busters, you're really pulling that out in episode 1, but
Yeah, it did feel a
you
little
know,
weird when you'd hear it in the new one, because it was nice when you heard the new songs, because
yeah,
it's again, it's the same band. It's in your, oh, okay, this is familiar but different, right? Like, but then
yeah,
like, yeah, there were times where I agree with you. It's like, oh, okay, we're going with this whole thing again, and
yeah. But
felt a
no,
little lazy.
the like the ending song, that was a jam, and the new music was good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like the old music, but it just kind of felt like you could have left that behind.
Yeah. So let's go into alternative. So alternative, we have our main our protagonist is Kana. So her and her friends, they're 17 years old in their final year of high school, and so this one. So I want to go back to your point about how you said if you were a teenager watching alternative, maybe it would resonate with you. So when watching, I'm sorry, watching progressive.
Progressive, yes.
Now we're talking about alternative,
Yeah.
man. So if you're a teenager watching progressive, now it might resonate with you. And I want to say, like, alternative. See, this is why I think that Baby isn't true, is because for me, alternative, although it took a while, it did start to hit with me in similar ways that the original did. I don't know. Did you have a similar experience?
I didn't have a similar experience, but I could see why you would say that.
You
Like,
have
I
no
credit
soul.
them for trying to do something different with alternative.
Mhm.
Again, like I said, this one I'm pretty sure is not linked to the other two in the terms of storyline. This is
So
like
how do you? I'm
a-
curious because I didn't get that from these. So what made you say that?
because this one kind of took notes from the original Fooly Cooly story and worked them in as this part of the story, but they never made any callbacks and they never tried to connect it. Even so, like, the biggest thing is they redid the core terminal thing coming
Hmm.
back,
The terminal core, yeah.
or terminal core, sorry. And
That's good.
when the Conti robots were there, she never mentioned anything about those looking just like Conti, and just the whole setup. I don't believe this is in the same universe, like, canonically, as the other two. There's just
Well,
they have made no connection between them.
there is one part at the end. It's in the last episode where you see. I mean, it's like right at the end, if I remember. You see sort of these flashes of all these things, and you do see Nauta pop up in it. It's like all of these flashes of animation. But again, that's like the only thing. So I don't know what
and
they mean.
that happened when the universe was breaking, which was a line that was
Oh, yeah.
thrown in there
That's
before.
true.
So, like, I wouldn't really say, and it's not like super important, but I to me got that this was trying to separate itself, and I can see why, because they, like I said, I can commend them for trying something new rather than this being a a coming of age story of someone who's trying to grow up too fast. It's the opposite. You know, it's a
Mm-hmm.
17-year-old who doesn't want to throw her childhood away, and she has a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
friends, and she's super close with all of them. And you know, it's not this loner character trying to be older than they are and not wanting to associate with other people their age. You know, so they attempted something different. It also comes off as a lot more of like a slice of life show. It's much
Yeah.
more about the four girls than it is about Haruko's interaction with the main character.
Yeah, and I think the four characters, the four girls, because like I said, Kana is the main one, but she has her three other friends, and there's different there's an episode for each of them basically, out of the six, and I think they're all interesting enough to follow and learn about and what happens with them, and they're all very distinct. So I think it makes it interesting. You know, it doesn't feel like you're kind of retreading. So I just want to point out something that genius alert. Look what I just figured out. So the first one's called progressive, like it's progressing the story, and the
Yeah.
next one's called alternative.
Yeah.
I'm sure you figured that out.
Yeah.
Literally just dawned on me in the middle of this
Yeah,
conversation.
and that,
So
I was gonna also bring that up. Like, I think that might be an intentional naming scheme about like
yeah,
what these kind of represent.
because I was so stuck on the music part of it, you know, because we have the guitars in the show and something
Yeah.
like progressive music, alternative music. It's just like it's a cool little thing to call it. Idiot me didn't realize that it's also a much better naming device. Yeah. Okay. So we were talking about it didn't really necessarily hit as much with you, but those things that you mentioned about her not wanting to grow up, not wanting to move forward, like not to, the wanting things to stay the same and learning how to deal with change. I think for me, maybe that was just personally that was something that resonated. I know, as a person, I don't always deal with change well. I can remember going from high school to college and just dealing with that and sort of the reality of, okay, now you're becoming an adult, and it is really that is the last time that you really have your youth. And you know, fortunately, we've been friends forever. I have my close friends that I've grown up with, but you know, I will admit, like watching it, I kind of thought about you guys and stuff like that, and it was just a little like I guess I could kind of relate to it in that sense, as I sort of put them as my friends that I don't want, you know, I don't necessarily want us to not be friends ever or have to deal with like being adults and doing those things. I can remember when we were all kids in the backyard playing. Like, of course you'd rather be doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so
Um,
like that's why I said I completely understand when you were leading into this where that like
yeah.
that's what you were getting out of it, and I felt those themes come out of it. Like I did kind of that hit with me a little bit, but I think what made it not really work overall for me is I just found this version of the show very boring, and I just really wasn't into any of no particular storyline interested me, and they were doing, you know, like you said, they were doing an episode each for four different characters, but it's only 6 episodes long, so there's really no meat to any of them overall. And
Hmm.
I do think, at least looking back at the original Fooly Cooly, I think like Haruko is kind of the glue that makes it all work for me, and she was very absent in this, and again, still just kind of not the same character. So
Again,
maybe I just
yeah.
don't like change, but I really like I don't know. I just really it didn't do much for me.
No, I agree with you though. Even in this one, she felt, you know, less of it felt less of the whole version of Haruko. It still felt like Haruko coming in and being a zany. I mean, there was a little bit more just because, you know, her dealing with medical mechanica and the different characters, and there's a little more seriousness to it. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
agree.
she
Like
did play a little more of the mentor role and not just
yes.
the crazy person role, but like it's still just and it's again cuz I wasn't invested in any of the other characters. It really made it hard to be invested in her cuz she's, you know, her whole character is how she interacts with real humans when she doesn't quite work on the same wavelength as them.
And I'll admit, and I like I said, I did enjoy that they talked about each character, but I am with you on that in the sense that, you know, it is only 6 episodes, and so, you know, you dedicate 3 episodes to three of the friends. Um, you know, then it kind of almost lost me. I think one thing I just want to touch on too that I thought was when Kana, she almost is with the boy that she liked, whose name I don't have off the top of my head, but sort of her love interest in it. Then she has the moment to tell him how she feels, and she doesn't. I just thought that was a relatable moment, I guess, as being young and the ever, you know, your ever changing emotions and feelings. And I know, you know, you think you really like someone, and then the moment comes where you maybe could like tell them or something, and then suddenly you don't. It's almost like having the thing that you want now. The
Yeah,
chase was more interesting.
you're all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, maybe I didn't really want that.
Yeah. So I guess there were just more themes within this series that I found relatable, even even as an adult now, just looking back and reflecting on being 17, being in high school, that sort of thing. Um, and I think the thing about uh, alternative is that it took a while to get me, and it wasn't until probably the last episode. And I will say, last episode I got some goosebumps at points, which the original one always does for me when I watch it. Certain moments of it. So it took a while. But then when it got me, it got me. Um, so I definitely enjoyed this one a lot more, and I could see myself going back if I wanted to rewatch it or put it on in the background kind of thing. But I could see myself going back to revisit this one someday. I don't think I can say the same about Progressive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have any expectation of ever watching either of these again. But if I were to watch one of them, it would be alternative. It at least had it was at least trying something different. Whereas, like you said, Progressive seemed to be trying the same thing but just missing on all the notes. So there's really just, to me, no value in Progressive at all. Where this, maybe on a second watch I'd connect with the characters a little more. Maybe I'd see something a little different than after the first one. Maybe if I didn't watch it immediately after Progressive, I wouldn't be coming into it with a bad taste in my mouth. I really don't know, but
Yeah, I feel like that almost helped me in a way. And to point out too, I watched the original series first, so I rewatched that. Then I watched Progressive and then Alternative. So I also had it was a very close proximity in time between watching all three. It wasn't like I was just recalling all these memories from Fully Cooley, and I just watched it like the day before. So
yeah, I had watched it probably like a week or two before I watched Progressive, so I was kind of right there with you.
yeah. So I guess to conclude, as a fan of Fully Cooley, let's say for other people, like I said, this is one of the most popular anime out there, considered one of the best. If you are a fan of Fully Cooley, would you recommend to someone to watch these as a fan? I don't know.
As a fan of Fully Cooley, I would tell people to skip it. That there's nothing there, at least in my opinion. To someone who's never watched Fully Cooley before, I would be interested how they feel about both of these, particularly Alternative, because it is completely its own thing. Even though Progressive, like, you don't need to have watched Fully Cooley to really get anything out of Progressive. There's no direct plot carryover, so you could really watch either of these as a standalone product, and it wouldn't affect how you take it in, I don't think.
Yeah.
Other than not having expectations, which I think might be a good thing for Progressive. So that's really how I feel about it.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to hear someone's thoughts of just watching these with a clean slate. You've never seen the original, you don't really know what you're getting into, so to start with Progressive to Alternative and watch those and just see as their own kind of entity, because again, you could just watch these without having seen the original. There is nothing that says to you got to watch the first one to then watch these. So I would be curious what someone's opinion would be of these two shows without having seen the original, and then maybe going back and watching the original and seeing. I just think it'd be interesting to see. I mean, obviously we can't do it. You can't unsee what we've seen, but
yeah.
But I just would be curious to see what that would do, and if maybe they would have a better response than we did. But I gotta agree with you. As a fan of the show, I can't say I hated it, but I can't say that I really liked it, which I think is almost worse in a way. It's like I'd rather have a very strong like dislike than kind of be almost indifferent to it, other than towards the end of Alternative.
Yeah.
I would say to go out of your way to watch this when there are a million things out there to watch that are very good. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't.
The only thing swaying me a little bit towards you might as well watch it is it's still only 6 episodes. It's basically the length of a movie. You're not
12 episodes total, but yeah.
Well, yeah, each one if you wanted to just watch one. But it's just not, to me, it's just not worth it. I wouldn't recommend it. I will say Alternative. If I was going to watch one, I'd watch Alternative.
I agree. So I think that concludes our thoughts on this. Are these worthy sequels? Are these worthy sequels? I gotta say, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's a hard no for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us for this last episode. Also, you can, if you'd like to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Booster Stream, which is where you can find the NQO podcast, please do. We really appreciate it. That's going to be all from us today, and have a good one.
Yep, we'll see you next time.